listening to Cowboy Logic with Jason Forby, a message of grace and hope.
Is everybody good? How do we now go from a servant mentality to a king mentality and to go through life with that? And how does that transformation happen? By the power of God, not by our religious power, right? So how does it happen? So I'm just giving you really a setup this week because one more time of how it happens, and then what does it mean to live life as a king? What does it look like to live life as a king, right? So I'm just setting you up this morning, one more dose of this before we move on to what does it look like, right? So Renee asked me the question Thursday night, how does it get from our heads to our hearts, right? You want a king mentality, you better hang out with kings. I've never been one to say, hey, you better be in church. Life is not about church. Church is supposed to be a supplement to life. But it is a true thing. If you're going to have a king mentality, you got to hang out with people that think like kings and at least want to think like kings and say, we're going. You hang out with chickens, you're going to act like a chicken. Everybody good? Every once in a while, I get to one of my favorite deals will fit into this deal. This is 1 Samuel 17, all right? So how does a guy that goes from tending sheep, he's the lowest of the brothers, he's the least thought of, some would even say he was an illegitimate son. How does he go from the least of these to becoming the most famous, greatest king that Israel ever had? There's this character named David. If you've been on the earth more than a week, you've surely heard of David and Goliath, right? David kills the giant Goliath. So that's the story. And so it's in 1 Samuel 17. You can go and read the whole thing, all the details, but I'm going to try not to read it all today. But here's an episode of a guy that goes from the servant to the king. How'd that happen? Right? How'd that happen? Because I think that needs to happen for us. And so let's just read some here. Okay, I'll set you up. So what's happening is there's a Philistine army and there's an Israel army, and there's a mountainside on one side. I've been there. Elvis took me there. I've been to the place. And so there's a mountain range on one side and there's a big valley. It's called the Valley of Elah. Mountains on the other side, right? So the Philistine army's on one side, the Israel army's on the other side. And every day for 40 days, the Philistines, they got this dude. His name's Goliath. He's a giant. It describes him in there. You can go read all that. But this is a big, scary dude. And the whole army of Israel is terrified, right? He marches down there and makes fun of them, taunts them, curses them, and belittles their God and all this stuff. And they run and hide and they're all scared, right? And Goliath marches out there every day and says, pick me out a man. Send one man out here to fight. And if he kills me, the whole Philistine army will be your servants, right? He struts down through there every day and they're all just terrified, right? So that's where we're at in the story. And let's see. All right. How about verse 12? Verse 12, this is 1 Samuel 17. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced in years among men. So the 3 older sons, they had went out to battle with King Saul, right? Saul's the king, and they're all in the army, and they all went, and David has to stay home and watch the sheep. And so they kind of make fun of him about that, and they think lesser of him, you know. David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock at Bethlehem. The Philistine came forward morning and evening for 40 days and took his stand. Then Jesse said to David, his son, take now for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and 10 loaves, and run to the camp to your brothers. Bring also these 10 cuts of cheese to the commander of their 1,000, and look into the welfare of your brothers, and bring back news of them. For Saul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. So David arose early in the morning and left the flock with a keeper, and took the supplies and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the circle of the camp, while the army was going out in battle array, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up in battle array, army against army. Then David left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine from Gath, named Goliath, was coming up from the army of the Philistines, and he spoke these same words, and David heard them. When all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him and were greatly afraid. The men of Israel said, have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. Here's what they said. Hey, the king said, if any man kills this giant, he's going to get the king's daughter, he's going to bless him with great riches, and he's going to be free in Israel, which means he won't have to pay no taxes. Yeah. They probably get more volunteers these days for this. And no more taxes. So the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who's coming up? The king is going to greatly enrich. This is what they said. The king is going to greatly enrich the man. He's going to give him his daughter, and he's going to be free in Israel. No more taxes for him. Then David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? The people answered him in accord with this word, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him, right? Here's what the king said. He said, the man who kills this giant will be greatly blessed and enriched. He'll get the king's daughter. He'll be free in Israel from taxes and all the stuff, right? And then David says, what? What's the king going to do? And they tell him again. And then he comes on again and he says, tell me again, what? The people answered in accord with this word, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him. He keeps on asking him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you've come down in order to see the battle. But David said, what have I done now? Was it not just a question? Then he turned away from him to another and said the same thing. And the people answered the same thing as before, right? So, we've learned from the prodigal son story. You guys remember the story of the prodigal son? The older brother represents religion. Older brother represents religion. So, right, older brother shows up in this story as well. David's saying, what's going to happen to the man that kills the giant? Tell me again. Give me the description one more time. It's like 3 or 4 times, right? He's saying, give me the description of what the man's going to look like that kills this giant and sets Israel free from this oppressor, right? Tell me again. And then religion's saying, well, older brother, I know why you're down here. Pointing him right to his own. I know the wickedness of your heart. I know why you're here. Who've you left your few sheep with? Come on, you picking up on the attitude of the deal? And it says David turned away from that, saying, all right, he turned away from him to another and said the same thing. And the people answered the same thing as before. When the words which David spoke were heard, they told them to Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Then Saul said to David, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth, while he has been a warrior since his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock. I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the bear and the lion, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul clothed David with his garments and put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with his armor. David girded his sword over his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. So David said to Saul, I can't go wearing this stuff, for I have not tested it. And David took them off. He took his stick in his hand and chose for him 5 smooth stones from the brook. And he put them in the shepherd's bag which he had, even in his pouch, and his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Then the Philistine came on and approached David, with the shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy, with a handsome appearance. I guess he was like a little pretty boy, I don't know. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine also said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day, not next week, not a month from now, this day right here, the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. And I will give the dead bodies of the armies of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." Then it happened, when the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand into his bag and took from it a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead so that he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine and killed him. Listen to this. But there was no sword in David's hand. There was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of its sheath and killed him, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. The men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted, pursued them, run them all down, took all their stuff and embarrassed them, put an end to them all, right? All right, you guys got it? All right, from a servant to a king, how'd that happen, right? From a servant to a king, how'd that happen? Do you notice that something rose up in David, and there was something coming out of David that was not normal, it was not what everybody else had, right? And so this thing is so loaded with so much good stuff, but I think it first starts out with David started rehearsing something. He started saying, okay, what's happening now? He said, this is what the king says the man's going to look like that kills this giant. This is what the man looks like that's going to kill this giant, right? You know, he's going to get his daughter. He's going to be rich. He's not going to have to pay taxes, you know, and all this stuff. And so David keeps rehearsing. Like, you remember the woman with the issue of blood, kind of where we started out in this whole deal? It said after hearing about Jesus' healing power, she kept saying to herself. She didn't just say it one time and have one thought. She kept on saying, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be made well. If I touch the hem of his garment, I will be made well. If I just touch his clothes, I will be made well. She kept rehearsing that to herself. She kept telling herself that over and over and over and over until it produced something in her, and she rose up against all odds, pushed through the crowd that she wasn't supposed to be in, got a hold of Jesus, and when she got a hold of Jesus, she gets healed, and Jesus says, who touched me? They're like, everybody's touching. He said, no, somebody touched me in a way that's different than everybody else touched me. And so she got something that not everybody else got because of what she had heard. She started rehearsing what she had heard. David said, tell me one more time. Give me one more time the description, what the king said the man looks like. Then religion comes along. Religion says, oh, no, you just need to be quiet. You need to go back to your sheep. I know how wicked you are. I know your motives and why you're down here. What's happening? So somebody's trying to rise up and to step into their destiny and their purpose and their true calling. And then religion wants to come along and talk you right back down and point you back to yourself. David's saying, I'm not going at this deal through my capabilities. Tell me one more time. Turned away from what religion had to say about who he was and what his capabilities are. I'm not listening to that stuff. Tell me again what the king said. That's why I love this. This is what we do all the time. Oh, tell me again. Tell me again This is how it happens, Renee. You keep on hearing this thing. Turn away from everything that's a voice that says you're not able and who you used to be or what you're not capable of or all this religious lie of you're just a sinner or you're just no good and you're just a failure and you're not able. Come on, that whole bunch is terrified, shaking in their boots. It said they dress up in battle array. They march out there every day and have some kind of war cry. The whole time they're terrified and scared and not one bit of fighting going on. Sounds like modern church to me. Was that too rough? Somebody comes along with a different, says, tell me again. Come on, tell me again. Come on, explain it to me one more time, what the king said. Come on, I got to get this description. Whoop, nope, I ain't listening to that. Turn away from them. Tell me again what the king said. Come on, rehearse it in me one more time, what the king said. This is what the man's going to look like. This is what the man's going to look like. This is what the man's going to look like. This is what the man's going to look like, until something rose up in David and then the word was sent to the king and then even the king himself said, what? You're not, no, you're too young. You're not able, right? Isn't it something? I thought about what the king says. One of the most important things I think I ever learned is to rightly divide the word, because you can take this Bible and pull something out of it to say God said, and then take something completely contrary to that and still say, well, God said. Oh, it's interesting. The very thing that the king said is what built faith in David. And then he can come along and get right something else from something that it was said that the king said and try to tear you back down. That's why this is such an important deal, where the king has to be Jesus, not this Old Testament idea of who we think God is. What does the real king say? It's like getting in a tight spot, right? It's like it's the king say, you can't go. And then David says this, hey, I was tending the sheep and a bear came. Come on, we've said it. The power of testimony, right? The spirit of prophecy. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. It says in Revelations, I think 19. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. In other words, by hearing his testimony of what he's accomplished, it carries its own power to reproduce that same thing again. And while everything's up in the air, this voice is trying to tear David down. David's rehearsing this voice, building David up. Faith is at work. Something's going on. It's like crunch time. Here it is, right? David says this, I was in tending my father's sheep and a bear came, tried to steal my lambs, and I grabbed him by his beard and I cut his head off. Come on, I feel like preaching a little bit. Is everybody all right? And a lion came, and the lion tried to steal my lambs, and I cut his head off. And the same God that delivered me from the hand of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from this uncircumcised Philistine. Something going on. I'm just telling you, how do we go from a servant mentality? How do we go from the least of them tending sheep to running the whole show? Turning away from the lie and keep on telling me what the king actually said. Keep on telling me the opinion of the king. Keep on describing the man that understands what. Come on, you guys with me? And then the power of this testimony just pushed him right over the edge, so much so that he went running towards the giant and said, on this day, not tomorrow, not next week, not a month from now, this day right here. This is how a king talks. You guys got it? This is how a king talks. And he said, this day. I know you come at me with a sword and with weapons and all that stuff. I'm coming to you in a name. I'm coming to you in a position. I'm coming to you empowered by the voice of the one that called me a king. He called me a king when I was still a lowly little. Come on, tell me again what the king said. Tell me again what the king said. He said, I'm going to feed not only your carcass, but the carcass of the whole Philistine army. The buzzards are going to be so full of your... You guys seeing what's happened in David? Here's where I'm getting to. Tell me again what the king says. This is how we go. This is how that mentality gets in us. Keep on telling me, right? Keep on telling me. What does that mean for us? Like David said this, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? They put that in there. You guys know what circumcised is, right? Ask your mama. Now, why is that in there? Why did they mention that? This is a story about war, right? And all this going on. Why? I mean, why is David mentioning that he's an uncircumcised Philistine? Well, circumcision in that time under the old covenant, in order to enter into covenant with God, the old covenant, the covenant of law with Moses, the way you entered into that covenant was for the guys, I don't know, they had to be circumcised. Right? What's David saying? Who's this joker think he is? He's not in covenant with God. Who's this joker taunting you guys, and you guys are afraid of this guy? What gives? This guy's not in covenant with God, and we are in covenant with God. Come on now. What's David saying? I'm in covenant with God and he's not in covenant with God. That means his size is irrelevant. That means my size is irrelevant. He might come to me with a sword, but I'm coming to him in the name because I have a covenant. And if David had that much empowerment through being in covenant with God on an old covenant that was based on man's performance and the blood of bulls and goats, how much more so for those of us who have a new covenant that's not based on man's performance, but on Jesus' performance, not based on the blood of turtle doves and lambs, but the blood of God himself. How much more should we be able to stand and say, tell me again who I am. Tell me again that I'm not living life according to man's capabilities, but I have access to live life according to God's capabilities. That's what my favorite definition of grace is now. Living life according to the capabilities of God instead of the capabilities of Jason. Come on, have I got the right bunch? Tell me again. I don't mean that old Saul. I mean, tell me this king that we're coming to know now, the new covenant, the king that's pure love, the one that loves just unimaginable, the one that says, you are so worthy. Is religion, it's the older brother that says, you're not worthy. What are you doing down here? You're no good. Get out of here. You're wicked. You're just a sinner. Turn away from that nonsense. What does the true king really say about me? He says, you're valuable. He says you're worthy. He says you're strong. Come on. He says you're worth it. Come on. He says you're filled with the Spirit of God. You're an overcomer. Come on. You guys with me? If God be for you, who can be against you? Right? Keep telling me. Tell me again what the king thinks of me. Tell me again what a man looks like. You guys getting it? I'm just setting you up. All right? Everybody's all right? I'm just setting you up, because what does it look like to live like a king? What does it look like to have a king mentality? That's what we're heading into. We're still in the same thing. We're just going into it further, right? Tell me again, because I'm getting transformed. It says this. You ready? There was no sword in David's hand. This is not written. This is Jason, all right? So you take it if you want it. There was no sword in David's hand. I say his sword was in his mouth. He heard. He rehearsed, he had testimony, and then he spoke, and he declared this day right here. He went from being a servant to understanding how a king thinks and a king mentality, and he declared and he decreed the way it was going to be, and that's the way it happened.
Please follow and share this message, and for more information, visit srcowboychurch.com.